Well, I think we're on.
I never know for sure because this thing's always like, I don't know. But hey, good morning.
Good morning. How are you?
You know what? I'm doing pretty great. How are you, Kira?
I'm all right. Admittedly, I don't normally do a whole lot before this thing on Tuesdays. This is
Sure.
usually like my first kind of scheduled commitment of the day. And coming out of a 3-day weekend, I had a lot of stuff to do this morning. So I was like, oh no.
It's a totally different attitude.
Yeah.
It's kind of messing with my chi.
Yeah, no, I was like, I don't know what's going on. It's
No, I
Tuesday.
I
We're
totally get it.
vibing. Um this is gonna be our last show for a little while.
Yeah, this is the season
The
finale.
season finale.
This is the season finale of Ask a Priest. It's not the series finale. Good morning, Leslie, but it is the season finale. I'll tell you what. So can I can I monologue for a second?
Oh, go for it. This is our opening
Oh,
monologue.
wait, first let's introduce ourselves and then I'm going to monologue a little bit.
Welcome to Are You There, God? It's Kira and Phil. I am Kira Austin Young, the priest in charge of St. Anne's in Nashville, Tennessee, Music City.
And I am Philip DeVaul, rector of Church of the Redeemer in the Queen of the Midwest, Cincinnati, Ohio. It is so good to be with you all. And Kira, as always and ever, it is a joy to be with you.
It's a joy to be with you. I'm already missing you over the summer.
I know. Well, I think we should find a way to hang this summer.
Yeah, and we should definitely at least like keep sending each other memes. So
Oh, that's my relationship with you. I mean, like this thing is going to take a hiatus, but like me sending you ridiculous memes about possums and skeletons is not going to change anytime soon. So we went into the pandemic protocol of shutting everything down and going all remote in March of last year. And I don't remember how far into that. It might have just been April even, or May at the latest, but I think it was April that I started to do what I called at the time, Ask a Priest.
mm-hmm.
And I had a couple of different goals with this. It's something so I did something like this back in California at my church there, but this was back, in the heady and exciting days of the internet when there was like Periscope existed.
Periscope, yeah.
And Periscope, for those of you who don't know, is this app that was owned by Twitter, where essentially you could record, live stream whoever you were, wherever you were in the world. Good morning, Betsy. And you could live stream and people could comment. They could type little chats and stuff like that. Like when you see live chat on Facebook or YouTube, it was like that, but it was all over the world, and unless you made it specifically private, anyone could join, and you could go on. If you were a user, you could go on, pardon me, you could go on and just like search what's going on and like pick something and just jump in. This is how, like, I remember there was that huge explosion. There was like an industrial explosion in Eastern Asia. I'm trying to remember exactly where. It was first reported on Periscope because someone there was just filming live and people were watching it. And so I started doing this thing back in California called, Ask a Priest. And I'd sit there in my collar with my phone on a little tripod and talk, and people would type questions and it would pop up. And I had a blast doing it. I would respond directly to the people. And because it said priest, a bunch of people jumped on. And, I'd always get like really obscene questions to start. And directly pointed questions that were critical of the priesthood, or of, you'd get questions about, pedophile priests, and you'd get questions.
All that good stuff.
Yeah. And it was every time. It wasn't sometimes, it was every time. And so I got really good at sort of responding to that. And I'd always get questions about gender and sexuality. And I would just go for an hour or something like that. And I started to get like a cool little thing happening. But then I left that church. The account was in my old church, and Periscope also just kind of died.
Yeah, I think people are doing something similar right now on like TikTok mostly.
I think you're right.
Like
I
you
think
can
you're
do like
right.
TikTok lives and
Right. But that's not long form generally, is it? It's pretty short form.
I mean the individual TikTok videos are, but you can do like a live TikTok.
So that would be interesting because I find that sort of anyway. So I did that format. So anyway, once we came here, pretty much when I stopped doing Periscope, Periscope died. But I'm not going to draw immediate inferences about my impact on Periscope.
You killed it, didn't you, Phil?
I can't. I can neither confirm nor deny that. So anyways, we were looking for something to do here, and then when we all were you know shut away in our own little houses, I thought this would be a really cool way to connect with people while and keep us connected. We were trying to find different touch points for the church digitally throughout the week that were different. You'd have like a worship thing, like a morning prayer you could listen to. We had Wednesday noonday Bible study, Thursday morning Bible study. And so anyway, so we decided to do this thing, and I wanted to bring it back, like ask a priest anything sort of thing. And so we started, and a big portion of that was literally just one, because I like to do it, because I like to talk with people and answer questions and kind of demystify all the religiosity and find ways to actually talk about it. But then also, like, I wanted to just keep us all together.
Yeah.
I mean, like, some of the people that are on here are people who didn't hardly ever leave their house for a year.
Right.
And have been really careful, and it's been really hard. And so how do we just stay together and talk and have another place to do that? Anyways, so we did that. Sometimes it was really awesome. Sometimes people would show up and there was like these really interesting conversations. There was a couple times when I was just like monologuing, like and that's not actually something I enjoy, believe it or not, even though I'm doing it right now, but I'm at least looking at you and I feel like we're having an interaction,
Yeah.
One time the chat didn't work and people were chatting me and I didn't know it. So I literally thought I was alone for the entire hour. And it was
talking to yourself.
I was just sweating, Kira. Like, I was sweating because I was like, do I just stop? Anyways, there were some good times. There were some bad times. There were some middle of the road times, but throughout, like, it got to a point where I realized, man, this would be so much more fun with a friend. Like, I would just have more fun. And you and I both have a good number of clergy friends, but that doesn't mean I'd want to do this with all of them. It had to be like, I wanted to just talk to someone that we were enough simpatico that we knew we would like and trust each other personally and theologically, but that we were different enough that, we were different enough that it wouldn't just be like two people parroting each other back and forth.
Right. I think we definitely vibe.
Yeah. I love that's the second time you've used that word in this thing.
I'm really like,
and I'm feeling it today. No,
vibing with the word vibe lately.
on this my last day before my last week before vacation, I'm feeling it.
Yeah.
So long story short, I invited you on the show to talk about your book, Pro-Choice and Christian, which I recommend to everyone highly. Pro-Choice and Christian by our friend Kira Austin Young. And you can Google it; it'll pop up. Viewer and listener, beware. When I asked Kira to be on the show so I could interview her about her book, the whole time deep down in my mind, I was like, I know this is going to be awesome. And then I'm going to ask her to co-host the show. And I was right. It was awesome. I thought we would talk about your book for a week, and we talked about it for 4 weeks straight.
Yeah.
We could have done a whole season just on that, I think. Anyways, long story short, now it's our show. It's not my show. It's our show. We get to do it together. And we've been, this show by myself and then with you has been going continuously since I think there's like maybe been 3 weeks we didn't do it all together ever. Or 4 maybe, since it started.
Wow.
And we're going to come back. We're not done. But yeah, Leslie was there. She was one of the people who was commenting, and I didn't see her comments. And I was like, flop sweat, nervous. Like, what am I doing? It was, where do I put my hands? It was bad.
Yeah.
But we're going to wrap up this season today. We'll be back. I think we're going to come back at the end of July. And we're going to start thinking about it in seasons. So we'll do a certain number of episodes and then we'll take a little break. We'll have reruns available for people. And we're going to work on making sure that each episode, I think we're going to be a little bit more clear up front about maybe what we're talking about. And so, tune in this week. Like last week, we said, tune in next week. We're going to talk about confession and polyamory. Separate issues, by the way.
Yeah, I was going to say, like, two great tastes that taste great together. Like,
we went, the groceries showed up at the door and my daughter pulled out a lemon and a lime.
uh-huh.
And she goes, I could make Sprite. Which Mitch Hedberg has a joke about that.
Right, there's the line about, like, they say it's like lemon and lime, but I tried it and there's like a little more to it.
I tried to make it at home and there's more to it than that. But here's the funny thing. So she said it in front of my youngest, and now my youngest is like literally walking around the house yesterday being like, Paige said she'd make Sprite. Why won't you let her make Sprite? I'm like, buddy, we can't just make Sprite. And he goes, Dad, we have a lemon. He went to the pantry. We have a lemon and a lime. I know, buddy. I know. This is going to be hard on you. I get it. Anyways, so we're wrapping the show up for the season. We're going to call this the first season. But we will be back later in the summer. And we will have reruns for you some of our greatest hits for you all to catch up on while we're gone. Maybe we'll do the first 4 that we did together and see what those look like.
Yeah. Well, and here I want to challenge those of y'all who are watching, especially those of y'all who've been watching for a while, who are logging in, listening in. When those questions pop into your head, like, write them down or send them to us. Like, we will compile them, even though we're not going to be broadcasting every week for the next next little bit. We still want your questions. We still would love, we'd love to come into like our second season with just like a backlog of questions to wrestle with.
Exactly. And I think what we'll start doing, and then by the way, next season, I think we're going to have audio available after the fact so you can listen to it like a podcast. And we're going to have guests. We're going to have guests on the show next season. Not every time.
Ooh.
Not every time. But if there's this particular subject we want to discuss.
Yeah, some special guests.
I've already got not to toot my own horn too much, but I've already got a bishop who's interested in being on the show.
Ooh.
I know.
Bring some croziers in here.
We'll see if we have time for them.
Yeah.
I'm not canonically resident in their diocese, so they can't make me.
Right. I mean, we don't want a bishop who has actual authority over us.
God, no. Yeah. That's actually one of the rules. No one who can get us fired, I think, is an important rule to have. So, but anyhow, I am going on vacation. I'm taking a month off.
I can't even imagine like the work that I did to take like 5 days off.
Yeah. Well, yeah.
Good for you. You absolutely deserve it. That is exactly what all of us need. And I'm jealous of you.
I'm grateful that I have a church that supports me in this. And I'm grateful that I have a staff that crushes it. And so I can just say, you do this, you do this. I have set a pattern, and this is a whole other conversation. We should talk sometime about because we need to talk about rest.
Mm-hmm.
Not just for clergy, because clergy love to talk about rest and then never get it.
Right.
But I think talking about rest in terms of like everybody, how it fits for Leslie and Betsy and Mary and Kathy and Gary and everybody who watches us, like, what does rest look like and why does it matter? Because, we all do deserve it right now. But also when someone, like I've said more than once, when someone's like, you deserve it, I said, well, whether or not I deserve it, I'm taking it. And I think we want to get into our heads about like rest, whether or not we deserve it, a thing we do. But I've set sort of like so I think I have this really like weird thing where I don't take any vacations throughout the year. Like I go nonstop I take weekends off, or I take time off, days off. but with very few exceptions, I don't take any time off throughout the year.
Mm-hmm.
And then I take all my vacation at once. And the good part about that is like I get to actually relax.
Yes.
The downside of that is it's not really healthy to go for 11 months.
Yeah, I feel I definitely know that's sort of, not to get too far into the weeds here, that feels like that's the very kind of traditional clergy pattern of like, we get to, one of the good things about our jobs is that we do get a fair amount of vacation or PTO or whatever you want to call it, time off. And the traditional sort of clergy schedule feels like it used to be, or has been for a while. Like you go, and then you take 1 month in the summer off.
Right.
If you have a spouse who has a sort of normal job,
this does
that
not work
doesn't always work. Of course, like if you have kids, that's kind of that can be a really good thing. But yeah, it does kind of limit the time you can take during the rest of the year.
Right. So I'm already planning a week off in next winter, like in January. We're going to go on a cruise.
Ooh.
Yeah. And that's going to be nice. And so that will already, like, I will start like right after Christmas and before Lent starts, I'm going to take a vacation. And we're starting this new program year. We've created a program year schedule. I want to show it to you when we're not recording, because most of the people watching would not actually be interested in all. But it's essentially like a program year schedule that includes periods of time where there's no programming. Mm-hmm. Like here's a 3-week chunk where there's no programming. Like, no, we're not, only essential programming for those 3 weeks. And so what does that look like? Like to take off from Bible study, to take off from different things. And how does that, so how do we create seasons? And so I'm trying to build into this staff, into this workplace, a healthier like approach to, work. And I keep telling my employees, like, don't work more hours than you are paid to work.
Yeah.
And take off the time that you're supposed to take off. I can't police it, but I can be like, have you done this? Are you taking some, I guess I could. I'm not going to make my life about micromanaging my staff schedule.
Right.
But I am going to work with them on continuing to like make sure they take time off and breathe.
Mm-hmm.
So we're going to try to create a healthy work culture is what I'm getting at. But it starts, I got to, as the man says, I'm starting with the man in the mirror.
Mm-hmm.
Shaman.
Yeah,
so,
I think it's that's one of those things. Like, I don't know what I'm trying to say. The modeling for that always kind of comes from the top of whatever system you're in.
Yes.
And I was really grateful that my bishop is always very clear about, like, he does his kind of vacation in a month chunk.
Yep.
And he also, took his sabbatical, like when it was up for him. So, making sure that those periods of rest happen.
Yep.
Are just absolutely crucial. And I think coming out of a pandemic, or moving into this next phase of the pandemic, however you kind of want to, term what we're going through right now. I think there's I'm feeling a really strong tension between needing to rest after the last year plus of just absolute anxiety and constant change, and coming up with new protocols, and like every little decision having to be, chewed on.
Yep.
And like wanting to kind of like get back to quote unquote normal, and like get all the gears firing. And it's a very difficult time for me, honestly.
Yeah.
Just sort of with that tension that I'm feeling of how do we move into a life post-pandemic, hopefully, that is not the same as what was before, that does have more room for a rhythm of rest.
Yeah.
Because I think a lot of, those of us who were lucky enough and blessed enough to kind of be able to shelter in place and kind of take our normal commitments
Yeah.
down a notch. Yeah, I think a lot of us kind of learned a lot from that. And
Yeah.
I mean, there was a couple, not this past weekend, but the weekend before, like my husband and I had a bunch of things that were going on. We had some family commitment and some friend things. And we looked at each other and were like, I kind of miss the pandemic weekends where we didn't have anything to do and we could just guilt-free, get a takeout pizza and watch a movie and not feel like all the FOMO, all the fear.
I think that's going to, I think that's one of the things that's going to emerge from this for our generation is you're going to see a generation of people who are going to we are going to stumble towards it. I don't think it's going to be all at once, but I think we're going to stumble towards finding that kind of equilibrium, because as difficult as all this has been, how painful, there's also been, we've seen that there is something, as you just said, really, really good about not having expectations placed on us 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. And it's almost like, can you imagine if like God had just told us to take a day off every week? Like if God had just literally commanded in the commandments, if God had just said, you need to take one day off every week where you aren't required to do anything and there are no expectations of you. Gosh, if only God had done that.
And yet, like as a society, our time off is filled with, okay, well, we need to do the chores around the house and that project that I said I was going to do and see my friends and see my family and connect with, whoever. And like all these there, even though it is time off, there are so many expectations for how we spend our time off.
Yeah.
And I think that has really like even coming out of a 3-day weekend, it was really nice to be able to have some time that like we got everything kind of around the house done that we needed to do in terms of just sort of light chores.
Totally.
We're able to kind of do some social stuff and we're able to like rest and relax. And it was like, imagine that.
And isn't that crazy? Now, yeah. And so I'm feeling all the things you're feeling. And I'm not trying to one up you here, but like add 3 kids.
Yeah.
Like, which I don't recommend actually at all. But but I was sick. I was actually sick this weekend. I'm still a little, I don't know if you can hear my voice. I'm a little, so I skipped church on Sunday.
Mm.
Kira, it's the first time I've ever skipped church because I was sick in my career.
Wow. Yeah.
And it's not because I was super sick. Had this been before the pandemic,
you would have powered through.
I would have gone.
Mm-hmm.
I would have gone to work with a sore throat and tried to stay away from people, had someone else celebrate the Eucharist, and told everyone I was fine. And if anyone said, "Are you sick?" I would have said, "I'm getting over something. I'm on my way up." That was my stock answer.
Mm.
I'd always say, "Oh yeah, but I'm like, it was there." Like I'm like, there's this, because in everybody's mind, you hit a certain point and then you're just getting over it. Mm-hmm. I would always tell people that's where I was, no matter where I was on the spectrum. Okay. And I only get sick maybe twice a year. This is the first time I've gotten sick since the pandemic. It's very odd.
Yeah.
Beautifully timed with me actually going out and seeing people.
Right. Exactly.
So I woke up with a sore throat on Saturday and was kind of bunk on Saturday. And then Sunday was like, I shouldn't be at work, but I would have gone. And I texted the appropriate people. I made sure that I had backup. Everything was fine. But, and by the way, if I'd been the preacher, I'd have gone. I wasn't preaching. Someone else was preaching. If I had been the preacher, I would have gone anyway. I know me. But we have a community covenant at this church around the pandemic. Mm. And one of those things in the covenant is, if you don't feel well, stay home. And I was like, I have to model this. I have to.
Yeah.
Like I have to do the thing. Like I helped create this covenant that I'm holding my people to, that we're holding each other to. Like, I have to do that.
It's so hard.
Oh, I felt so guilty. And I'm going to just like say this. I felt guilty for resting when I was sick.
Mm.
And I thought, what will people say? Where's Phil? Has his vacation started yet?
Yeah.
Now, I didn't hear any negative words. But I don't know, I don't know. It'll be interesting to see. And I was just paying attention to myself, like how I processed all this and how I felt about it. And so I had all sorts of stuff I was going to do this weekend. I didn't do any of it because my body needed to rest.
Mm-hmm.
I watched 4 movies on Sunday.
Nice.
And I watched 3 movies yesterday. It was pretty great. So, but anyways, but I didn't do any of the stuff I was going to do in my backyard.
Mm-hmm.
You know the drill.
Yeah. Oh, I know.
And there's a whole generational thing that's going on where people our generation and below are really pushing about this. And people our generation and above, like I'm right at that cutoff of Gen X.
Mm-hmm.
So like right above me and then older are kind of looking at our generation being like, you, what do you think you're doing? Like you need to work more. Like you need to work more hours like we did.
Mm-hmm.
And then our generation is being like, no, we're not gonna. And the generation below us is like, we're 100% not gonna. Like millennials are just like, no, we're not gonna work the way that you want us to work. It's going to be different. And it's really weird. And I don't really have anything profound to say about it other than it's happening. And I don't know where the church will shake out about it. And I don't know how we'll play, what we'll do. So I guess we'll just have to find out. I don't know. But
yeah,
if I can help you, I assume your wardens and vestry understand how tired you are.
That is.
I shouldn't have asked that question online.
We were gonna work at the behest of my therapist, who was like, you need to write a letter to your leadership.
You do. I didn't mean to bring something up that was I didn't know.
Yeah.
But it's so important that we get our leadership on board with us because we need to be supported when we're honest about advocating for our need for rest. And I really don't like on social media clergy who complain about how hard their jobs are. It really bothers me because I feel like we have cush jobs in so many ways.
Right.
And we have good benefits and we have a certain level of security that others don't have. And at the same time, our jobs, without complaining, our jobs are demanding emotionally.
Yeah.
And the pandemic has hit faith communities in a way that it hasn't hit a lot of other industries. We're not the worst off.
No.
It's probably theater. But it's
live performance.
Yeah, live performances, it's a whole other level.
Mm-hmm.
But it's been devastating for clergy because the primary way that we know how to be with people has been taken away from us.
Yeah.
And so we've found ways and they've been really interesting. We've done cool things, but it's exhausting,
Yeah. And I think, one thing I was realizing while I was recently on vacation was that I have functionally been on call 24/7 for the last 8 to 9 years of my life as a solo clergy person at a church.
It's not okay.
Like,
it's one of the reasons that I wanted to work at a multi-clergy parish.
Like even when I am off, yeah. I will get called.
Yeah.
I got called while I was on vacation. I've been on vacation and had people die. And of course I want to know. And yet like, I'm at the point where I can't do that part anymore. Like I need to kind of figure out
the church
and
anyone at your church, if they watch this, here's what I want to say, right? This isn't about Kira. It's about the community. it's not healthy for you all as a community to depend solely on one person for that area of your life. And that's true for so many churches. This isn't about you. And it's about this church, my church. We've got something set up, but so when I went on vacation, well, last year I had to move. But the year before that, I went on vacation. I think I took 3 weeks off. I didn't hear from a single person. Not one. Other than if we were on social media and they were saying hello, but nothing about the church. And I needed it and you need it. We all need it. And I don't know anyone who doesn't need that. I don't know anyone who doesn't need that. And this is a theological issue for me, friends, because saying you need a person all the time is not healthy. It's codependent. And churches, not necessarily either of our churches, but churches in general are prone to codependency with their clergy, to create dynamics where the clergy don't know who we are without you, and you don't know what to do without us about certain aspects of your life. And while it makes sense on a normative level that you need a leader to lead you and that relationship be important, that leader needs to breathe. And you need to create a system where the leader can breathe. If you're not, that's not good for anybody. Anybody. So it's not even about you, in my mind, Kira. It's about how do we set up a church community, right? That this is where we understand what caring for each other looks like, now it does require us to advocate for ourselves. And that is the hard part. Because I found myself in a room with my wardens one time saying, and the treasurer one time saying, well, my real expectation is eventually that you pay me more to do less. And here's the best part. I wasn't kidding.
Yeah.
And everybody laughed and I laughed and I was like, I'm laughing too. And also I'm not kidding. That the expectation is that we should work around the clock for on a shoestring budget because we're a nonprofit, because we love what we do. And therefore we shouldn't push. Mm-hmm. And so I don't think that's we've got to think carefully about that. We've got to think carefully about that. So, last Thanksgiving, I just told everybody on my staff, everybody's taking a week off and you're not allowed to have any programming that week. And you're not allowed to have, you can't do 2 weeks of work the week beforehand to
get ready for.
Right. You can't we need to have this pre-recorded for the week we're gone. No, the week we're gone, there won't be that thing.
Yeah. And
we prepped the church and we told everybody, and I said, one of my parishioners ran a Zoom morning prayer that Sunday. And I don't know, we'll see what happens this year. We'll see what happens this year during pledge season.
Yeah.
If people bought in, I think it's gone really well, but we'll find out.
Right. Yeah.
We'll find out.
I want to make sure we get to our questions.
Fine.
I know it's so easy to get distracted, and particularly to Leslie's question.
Let's start with her question and we'll do confession another time.
Okay, cool. Do you want to, so the topic is sort of polyamorous relationships. Of course, in the church teaches an ideal of monogamy. That is, I don't know, what is it? It's not exactly that clear in the Book of Common Prayer. In the Book of Common Prayer,
it isn't. But yeah.
In the Declaration of Consent, you say that it's going to, your intention is for this marriage to be lifelong.
Yep. And monogamous.
And monogamous.
And the historical tradition of the church.
Yes.
Was for a very long time really the only appropriate essentially sex outside of marriage, abstinence or marriage, marital sex. People don't always think that that's how the Episcopal Church is, but historically that was at least the tradition. Even if it's not in the catechism, that's what I was taught.
Yes.
Well, that got broken open and we'll talk about that in a little bit, but I'm going to read her question.
Go for it.
Kira and Phil, what are your thoughts on polyamorous relationships? That is to say, open marriages, or even unmarried people having multiple partners, where everyone in the relationship is aware and consenting, of people in those relationships having emotional and possibly sexual relations outside of their main partner. I know the US law is against polygamy and the church only recognizes monogamous marriage, but is consensual polyamory outside of marriage bad or somehow worse than divorce? The main distinction I want to draw here, by the way, she says, is that polyamory I am talking about is consensual for everyone in the relationship rather than cheating on someone. So everything's open and above board and consensual across the board.
Yeah.
Well, I like this softball, and very easy to answer. This is a perfect way to end our season.
Right. I've actually done a lot of, I mean, not a lot, but I have done some work on this, just to educate myself, and because this is something that comes up more and more in the context of the church, in the context of premarital counseling I've done for couples. And I wanted to have kind of a working knowledge. One thing I want to say first and foremost is that relationships are complicated. I mean, I think one of my takeaways, especially after writing a book on abortion, is that like people's lives are more complicated and fraught than like really we can even kind of imagine.
Yep.
And it's just, it can be very difficult to kind of say like, I'm going to morally condemn this type of relationship, you know, across the board. Whereas like, I'm thinking about some situations that I know of and have encountered where like, say somebody is with somebody that they've been with their entire lives, and that one of the partners is has a debilitating physical illness. Maybe it's Alzheimer's, or it's some kind of progressive illness, and the second partner is absolutely dedicated to staying with the person and caring for them and being with them. But they also have some emotional and maybe physical and sexual needs that are no longer being met in that marriage, even though it is a committed, strong marriage.
Yeah.
Like, is it really that bad if they, if they were to seek some sort of comfort? Again, doesn't even have to be sexual, like just somebody that is there to support them while they are there for their partner who they love very, very much and are committed to taking care of. I mean, I guess my answer is like, I feel that that's a very understandable need. I know that's different from kind of polyamory as we're sort of talking about it. But I think
it's an entrance into the conversation.
Yeah, I think we've even the books I've read come about polyamory sort of make it sound a little more like it's for young people, or it's for like kind of hippies. It's kind of a countercultural thing, when I think, even though polyamory as a concept feels it's new, and I think conversations around polyamory bring a lot of important things into the conversation about consent and about people fulfilling different roles in one another's lives, in a way that I think our focus on the nuclear family has gotten so narrow over the last few decades. I'm reading Jesus and John Wayne, and it really kind of talks about this like focus on the nuclear family and how that has become so political, mostly for evangelicals, but I think that's bled over into the mainline church as well. And so that like your partner, your spouse is the only one. They're your best friend. They're your best lover. They do the grocery shopping perfectly. They are there for you whenever you need them, and vice versa. And like, that's just not realistic. So for me, I think one of the things I've really learned from polyamory, from those who practice it, is that you need more people in your life. Like, you need to have more relationships in your life. You need more friends. You need people that you can turn to and kind of say like, hey, my spouse can't or won't or whatever fulfill this need for me in this way, like, but I can talk to you about it. Like,
So
and that is a really important addition to the conversation.
yeah, so I'm going to put sex aside for a moment. We'll come back to sex. Don't worry, I'm not sidestepping that.
Yeah.
We have to talk about it.
Right.
Because I wouldn't talk about it unless I had to be honest with you, not with you people. But hold on, I'm going to cough. But what I want to say is, to the degree that you're describing polyamory, it's not a new thing. It's actually language. It's new language for a thing we already do, which is that no one person can fulfill us and complete us. You complete me is bullshit.
Yeah.
It's bullshit. It's bullshit. And there's nothing in the Bible, nothing in the Bible that would suggest that two people are meant to complete each other. Now, two become one flesh is some pretty powerful language, but that's not about completion.
Mm-mm.
It's about a new creation, a new reality. And we can get into, and I want to talk about two become one and that idea of marriage and all those pieces, because I think marriage is really important. And I don't think you'll, as Kira and I are both married. We take marriage very seriously, or we wouldn't have gotten married. Right?
Yes.
And I'm very much, I love marriage. And I love when people get married. But so this isn't an attack on the institution or anything like that. So right out of the gates. But the idea that because you've married someone, they must be this thing for you, all the things that Kira just listed, we already know that's not true. We live like we want it. And by the way, the degree to which we try to make it true is the degree to which we make ourselves and our partners miserable.
Yes. Yes.
Trying to hold someone to the you complete me standard is unfair for them and unfair for you. It doesn't work for anybody. Okay. So we already, and then Leslie's joke is actually really funny. She says, the Bible doesn't give me permission to go through my boyfriend's phone and make sure he's not talking to any of the girls. What? Yeah, right. That's like that if that showed up, it would be in like 2 Timothy. That'd be some
Right.
2 Timothy stuff.
Yeah. But it is a good point about like, we think that possessiveness is romance.
We do. I only worry because I love you. I'm just jealous because no, you're jealous because of your stuff and you worry because of your stuff.
Mm-hmm.
But anyhow, so like, we've got this idea that we've like, okay, we have relationships with people outside of our marriage that are love relationships. And you'd say, well, they're not romantic though. And mostly you'd be right, except there is a certain romance to any friendship. This is where I start to get into territory where people get worried about us. I'm on, my wife can see this. I'm not saying anything that I'll regret later. But it's important for us to think through carefully. Like, you have fallen in love with friends before, and I'm not talking about wanting to be with them like you would in a marriage or a relationship or like a sexual or romantic, but there is a romance to friendships. There's a romance, and this is real, attraction.
Mm-hmm.
And that doesn't, and I'm not necessarily, and this is the thing that we have to remember, physical attraction isn't the only kind of attraction, people. You can just like certain people and not know how to explain it. You just like who you are around them and they like who they are around you.
Oh gosh, I've had the biggest like intellectual crushes on some of my like college and
that's what I'm talking about.
Professors. Just like, oh, I just want to like sit at your feet and like bask in your brilliance.
And I would personally say that's romantic in a certain way.
Yeah, I think so.
And so I think we already are these things.
Yeah.
To that degree.
Mm-hmm.
And we have these relationships of love in community that exemplify the reality that it not one person or one little unit of husband wife, by the way, male and female, and then 2.5 children can like perfectly suit you. That we need to experience love in healthy relationship beyond that. So from that framework, I would say we've opened up the door to a conversation about polyamory within Christianity that seems acceptable. However, sex. And I do believe our commitment to people is important. That there is so much biblical language around. God uses monogamy a lot as a descriptor in terms of our relationship with God. That we don't cheat on God with other gods. That we're, and we could go around about all the different things that means. But I think one of the things it means is like, how do you serve God and other gods? How do you care for God and commit yourself? How do you stay focused on that reality and that relationship? It's like when, well, I'm going to stop. Where do you, like, I have a lot of thoughts, but where do you go, Kira?
So I think one of the things that the, whatever you want to call us, progressive Christians, liberal Christians, mainline denominations, have really not quite yet absorbed is the way in which reliable birth control has changed the conversation around sexual ethics.
Go on.
Because for the rest of human history, if you were having sex with somebody, especially a male and a female person, you were risking pregnancy.
Right.
And of course, sex in this situation is defined. So I'm gonna get real. I'm gonna say the words penis and vagina on the internet.
Here we go.
But we are talking.
Those are medical terms.
Yes, we are talking like penis and vagina sex. You are risking pregnancy on some level, or sexually transmitted diseases. There's a lot of reasons that monogamy, again, defined as sort of one man, one woman, is an ideal, especially if you're talking about you're transferring your wealth through generations. Yep. These are like critical concepts. You want to make sure that it's your son who's getting the family farm or whatever. And a lot of that really kind of goes out the window with reliable birth control. And it's certainly good for women, right? For the most part, that we have a little bit more freedom.
Whoa, wait. I'm going to interrupt you a little bit. Your point is that it changes the game.
Yeah.
I mean, Phyllis Tickles said this. Phyllis Tickles said this at a church convention that I attended 14 years ago. Mm-hmm. And I was like, and I thought she was overstating the case. And now I'm like, no, she wasn't.
Yeah. And we have not, as kind of mainline Christians or clergy people, really absorbed that. And we're still teaching the kind of old lens of like the only sexual ethic is celibacy and or abstinence or sex within marriage. And again, like, I think we also need to expand our definition of what sex is, or what sexuality is.
Which, by the way, we were doing, we just weren't talking about it.
Right.
like every kid in the 20th century grew up, especially boys, with specific sexual acts being tied to different bases in baseball. Yes. And the arguments were, well, how do you understand first, second, and third? Hold on, what are those things? I had it all mapped out, which means I already had an understanding of different kinds of sexual acts being sex or sexual. Mm-hmm. And I already had that in my head without knowing that that's what I was doing.
Right.
Because we were taught it was, I literally was taught like there's like, well, because of the thing you just said, sex makes babies.
Yes. Yeah. So, but especially like our LGBTQ siblings.
Yes. Yes. Keep going. This is yes.
If you don't have one penis and one vagina, you're doing other things that are sex. There's still sex, even if it's not one penis in one vagina.
Okay, I need to take a breath. This is I'm not as progressive as you all think, and this conversation is. I want to pace it. I just want to pace it. I was gonna bring up the LGBTQ issue in the sense of the same similarly the way you brought up the birth control, because for the Episcopal Church, the attitude was no sex outside of marriage. And then we started to realize that there were a whole group of people who weren't allowed to get married.
Yes.
But we believed their relationships were holy. Some of us did. Which immediately created this dynamic of, oh, well, I guess there's a space for sex outside of marriage if you're not allowed to be married.
Yeah.
And then, you know what they call that, don't you, Kira? Slippery slope.
Slippery slope. We're just slippery slope.
Slouching towards Gomorrah. We're just slouching towards Gomorrah. That's what we're doing.
It's going to be bestiality, before you know it.
That's everybody's concern. It turns out everybody's just worried that we're all just trying to figure out how we can get our own farm animals. I don't get it. It's crazy. But
yeah.
So, okay. But these pieces, birth control and the recognition of the sanctity of same-sex relationships together, they have to change the way we think about this.
If we let them, yes.
Well, they already have, right?
Yeah.
But and by the way, if we're not sure how we feel about this, even some of the most conservative of people that I know either lived with someone before they got married or have children who lived with someone before they got married.
Yeah.
Like Chris and I actually didn't live together before we were married. But that was frankly, we met in December, started dating in January, got engaged in May, and I went to seminary in August.
Wow.
And so we spent a year apart, got married the next summer, and then moved in together. So had we not been in the weird schedule, we probably would have lived together before we were married. So I don't know. We already know it's complicated, more complex than this simple thing.
Yeah.
The question is, are we okay with it? We still haven't gotten into just open marriages and things like that.
Yeah. I mean, I will say that my immediate gut reaction, even having kind of done some of the work I've done and research and read, is that committed monogamy is still the ideal and still something that we should strive for.
Yeah.
It's still it's certainly the normative teaching of the church.
Yeah.
In monogamy in marriage. Let me preface that. I feel like people who aren't married, I don't, and to some degree you can do whatever. But that is certainly the church's teaching on marriage. I think it gets complicated though. This is not, again, it's talking around polyamory a little bit, but when we're talking about infidelity, something like 50% of couples, maybe even more, report an episode of infidelity in the life of their marriage.
Yeah. Not
all of them get divorced.
That's very true.
And some of them are able to use it as a springboard for their marriage. And one of the quotes in the book I just read, The State of Affairs by Esther Perel, one woman kind of said, it was the death of our first marriage, and now we're starting our second marriage, but to the same person.
Yeah.
So it's not, I think the other thing that we, as a culture, we see infidelity as an absolute deal breaker.
Yeah.
And it's not good, but I also don't think
we already know it's not actually a deal breaker for a lot of people, even though we think it is.
Right. Right. And it's something that has been happening in relationships since time immemorial, of course, like, right. I mean, that used to be the whole thing, was like, guys, you got married to have somebody who would pop out your babies, and then you kind of had fun with whoever else wandered through town.
Right.
And
but
now,
if you had a baby with them, you had to take care of it and make them part of your brood.
yes.
Also, men were not only allowed to, but oftentimes expected to have multiple wives.
Yeah, the expectation of having like a mistress, or again, like it's not entirely consensual.
Okay, so that's a huge piece. Consent was not actually part of the traditional marriage.
Right.
I mean, traditionally, a girl, who barely, like a 12 or 13-year-old, her dad had to consent. Right?
Yes.
But even now, we still have these vestiges, these like literal vestigial acts of who gives this woman to be married to this man.
Yeah.
What? And I do it. I'm part of the problem.
There is so much like compulsive heterosexuality in our marriage service, and like gross stuff that's just
the heterosexuality, I understand. It's the profound patriarchy, not only that is part of the liturgy, but that people want. The white dress signifying virginity being presented to the man by your dad, because you don't belong to him anymore. Now you belong to him. It's all there.
I know. It's just so ingrained, and
we did all of it.
Yeah, I mean, I did it all in my first wedding, and my second wedding, I was like, I know more now. I'm gonna like.
Yeah.
I remember my mom being like, well, so is your dad this before we kind of pivoted for a pandemic wedding, but my mom was like, is your dad going to walk you down the aisle? And I was like, no, I think I'm just going to walk myself down the aisle. And
I've got this.
Huh.
Yeah.
Okay.
I think I know how to walk down an aisle. We're nowhere near where I want to be at this, and we need to wrap up soon. We might need to start our next season with this conversation, but I want to bring Jesus into this conversation. Like very, very, I think Jesus has been a part of this conversation the whole time, but I want to very specifically and explicitly bring Jesus into this conversation. I believe that Jesus founded a community that became the church. And by the way, I'm not the only one who believes that. That's not radical. That's Christian doctrine. But that community, and Leslie and Betsy are both in my Thursday morning Bible study where we've been studying Galatians. That community is founded on the principle that loving your neighbor is the fulfillment of every command that God gives. And that the goal of a community is to be a community founded in the crucified Christ, crucified to the world as we understand it, so that we might see Christ present in every person we meet and treat them accordingly. This means that every interaction with people we have is meant to be one that is a building up of the sacredness of that person. Everyone, every interaction we're supposed to have with anybody, whatever the different kinds of relationships we have with them, child, friend, teacher, student, priest, parishioner, husband, wife, lover, whatever it is, the goal for you as a Christian in that relationship is the upbuilding of the other person as the recognition of Christ in that person. There is room for sex in that. And you got to be careful there. We got to be careful about how we talk about that. That's a whole other conversation. But sex isn't inherently bad. It's neither inherently bad or inherently good. It's just a thing that exists. But what I want to say is, like, to me, how do we engage in any kind of relationship that honors the sanctity and the beauty and the Christ indwelling of all involved? That's what I'm trying to get at. So is that possible in a polyamorous sexual relationship? If the answer is yes, then even if it weirds me out, I will find a way to be fine with it.
Yeah.
It does weird me out, just to be super clear. But if the answer is yes, then I will find a way to accept that in my life, accept it in my sort of purview. We should find a way to talk about it and be okay with it and understand it and see how it's a blessing.
Mm-hmm.
And if the answer is no, no matter how cool it might seem, and no matter how well thought out and wonderful the people are who are interested in it are, if the answer is no, we shouldn't be a part of it. But I think that should be our metric.
Yeah. Well, and here's the thing in what you're saying. For so long, actually, heterosexual relationships have gotten a pass on that. And we've seen marriage as normative. Whereas actually in scripture, Paul is pretty clear about you should actually stay celibate.
Right. Marriage isn't normative at all.
And only get married if it's going to help you be a better Christian.
I had a conversation with a parishioner who was getting ready to leave the church over our not new, but I guess repeated sort of open and advocate support of LGBTQ plus inclusion and equality. And it's not new, but I think there's just they're enough's enough sort of thing.
Mm-hmm.
And this person was sort of I think it was literally the Jesus and John Wayne thing. I think the nuclear family is this very specific holy thing.
Mm-hmm.
And I said, Jesus says the opposite.
Right.
And I literally said to the parishioner, Jesus says the opposite and he's your Lord.
If anything, Jesus is an advocate for what so many of our LGBTQ plus siblings are, and this is Pride Month, so happy Pride.
Yeah, happy Pride.
Are living in their lives this idea of chosen family, of surrounding yourself with a mutual community that is not necessarily bound together by blood or genealogy or other things, but by love.
We become a community because we belong to each other in Christ Jesus. Before we wrap up, and we should talk about this more, Leslie, we haven't even scratched the surface, or maybe we've just done a little scratchy.
We've scratched
the surface, right? But here's the thing for me. When I said sex is neither inherently good nor inherently bad, I believe that, but I also don't think sex is just sex. Physically, two bodies connecting is an act of intimacy. And where there's intimacy and vulnerability, there is, and I use this word genuinely, there's risk. Mm-hmm. Risk is fine. Risk is part of the deal. Any relationship we're in, for Kira and I to become closer friends, we are risking something. We're risking getting hurt. What if we go deeper into our friendship and then she finds out something about me and she doesn't like that thing about me, or she just realizes that she doesn't like me that much and she just is finds something else to do, but I thought we were really good friends. Everybody knows what I'm talking about. Intimacy requires vulnerability, and vulnerability is a risk. There is vulnerability and risk involved in any kind of sexual act. And I don't just mean the risk of disease. This is not that's not the conversation we're having.
Right.
So that needs to be one of the pieces of discernment. My wife would not be okay with me having sex or sexual acts with anyone but her, period. Full stop. It doesn't matter. I could try to explain to her. Oh, and by the way, I too would not like it if she did either. Now we could do some work and try to explore, are these some things that is this about possessiveness and jealousy and da-da-da-da-da? But in the meantime, part of our respecting each other is respecting those boundaries.
Right.
Now, from a larger structural standpoint, could a person or people be in relationships that have a different set of boundaries? We know that people could be in relationships. Could those boundaries be healthy? Could they be Christian and healthy? I'm at the point where I'm I honestly don't know.
Yeah.
But I used to be at the point where I was just absolutely not. This is absurd. But my reasoning was mostly just because I was just stop. Just enough. And now I'm this is worth, Because when we explore these things, look at the conversation we've had today.
Yeah.
We end up talking about what love is about, what relationship is about, what consent is about. We end up partially dismantling the patriarchy a little bit.
Trying to, just a little bit.
Breaking it a little bit. Anyway, I'm gonna stop. I'm just thinking now. Now you want to wrap us up here?
Yeah. Yeah, no, this is like it's a very active conversation and topic for discussion, because I think it's something that maybe those of us who were raised in slightly more like socially conservative areas are like learning a little bit more about. And when I encounter something that I immediately kind of have a like squicky reaction to, I'm like, let me like learn a little bit more about this and kind of unpack where that squickiness is coming from. And is it coming from, I just don't understand it well enough yet, or this is just the norm I was raised with, and I think that's the only way to kind of be.
Yeah.
But the more, Phil, as a clergy person, you probably encounter like just a lot of different relationships and a lot of different families and a lot of different ways that families and relationships and like communities of chosen families are structured.
Yep.
And I have seen that happen in a healthy way, and I have seen that happen in an unhealthy way. And so there are certainly ways in which monogamy can be profoundly unhealthy. And there are ways in which polyamory or polyamorous setup can be profoundly healthy. And so it's not to say this one model is the only right way to do things.
That's right.
Which of course makes everything very complicated. I sort of enjoy the appeal of kind of saying, all we need is the nuclear family to be healthy, and then we can America will be great again. And, that
just like Jesus wanted.
The strong soul of our nation is reliant upon a strong nuclear family. When that has sort of never been the case. There have always been spinster aunts, and there's always been the teenager who got pregnant and was sent away to a convent to have the baby, but she was visiting family. There is, we've had ways of kind of dealing with people and things that are outside the norm. And and we're in a place right now of kind of like those experiences are more centered and we can learn more from them. And try to create a better and stronger community, because it's hard. I mean, God, like Phil, you were saying, like, you guys have 3 kids. Like, that's not normal for just the 2 of you to be raising these 3 kids on your own.
No.
People around you. You should have friends and family and extended family and extended friends. And, the person who never got married, but is essentially a grandparent, or like, there's so many places for everyone, no matter like kind of what your family set up. Like, and I long for the church to be a place that models that.
The nuclear family is not in the Bible.
That's the main takeaway.
I know we said that earlier, but I have to say it one more time. Well, no, because I'm just, as you're talking, like you're saying all this and you're preaching at me, Kira, and like I'm receiving your gospel, like I'm receiving the good news that you're preaching right now, and I'm sitting here going like, it just dawns on me, like you hit me hard today a couple times, because I'm just like I've always thought it was a given in some way that the nuclear family was okay. It was ideal, even while thinking all sorts of contrary things, like we need to be parts of tribes. We need to be parts of communities. We can't do it all by ourselves. What are we doing to ourselves? And today, the magnitude of just like how deeply misogynistic quote unquote traditional culture is, how completely disenfranchised you are in a model that says you used to belong to this man and now you belong to this man. Make his name your name. And of course you give up your name. Right. And serve him and make his babies. If you don't, there's something wrong with you. And we all still, by the way, we all still live in that. Like, even if we try to disengage from it, that is still the normative way. Like, that is still the normative thing.
And here's the thing that I will go to my grave preaching is that is profoundly damaging for men too, because they are told it's your job to provide. That's all you're kind of good for. And to do so, you should sacrifice a meaningful relationship with your children because that's sort of your wife's job.
That's right.
Like, you're the disciplinarian, you know, and what if a man loses his job in that situation? Like,
then he's nothing.
Then he's nothing.
That's the thing.
And
that's the thing.
And it's just so I'm just such a big advocate for people to do the things that they're good at. My dad is the one who cooks for my parents, like, because he enjoys it and he likes it. And like, there's nothing emasculating about that. No. Like, my mom's the primary financial breadwinner. Like, it's the way that it's set up. Like, it's not a pro or a con. It's just like the way it shook out. Like,
yep. It's, well, we're gonna stop, but there's so much here. And when I get really when we get into these conversations that are actually pretty radical, not in the sense that they're new for the world, but new for me, and I think new for people, some of the people listening to work through some of this stuff. Primarily, Kira and I have a desire to be faithful to God and Jesus Christ. And our working out of this stuff is meant to lead us into deeper obedience to Jesus. This isn't about fitting in with a specific political or cultural climate. This isn't about being au courant in that way or urbane. This isn't about being, and I just don't even, the terms politically correct or woke, they're so polemicized. I don't, this isn't about any of those things. We are talking at our core about how we live our lives and set up structures that glorify God. And we are part of a culture that has told us that there's only one way to glorify God, and it looks like this. And that's been killing us.
Yeah.
I think this is what Paul rails against in Galatians. I think one of his great contributions to the church is that single-mindedness about being connected to Jesus in love and through community, and understanding those communities are going to be radical by nature. And it's terrifying for people. I know it's scary to go out on a limb, but I will just say, if we're with Jesus, we're not alone at all, right? So we'll keep pushing each other. Before I go on vacation, Kira, what have you been listening to this last week?
So I will say that in the last month, I have spent a lot of money on concert tickets for the fall months. And my first concert that I bought tickets to is a concert at Cannery Ballroom with Too Many Zoos and Big Frida. So I have been listening to some New Orleans bounce music lately, and that will like pump you up. If you are feeling, if it's a gray, gloomy day, like it is kind of here, and you need to kind of be, Tuesday of a holiday weekend, getting back to work, like that will, those brass and those beats will get you pumped.
I love it. I just found out right before the call that the Foo Fighters are coming to Cincinnati.
Nice.
They're not my favorite band in the world, but I like them.
Yeah.
And I hear their shows are amazing.
I have also heard that.
And Dave Grohl wrote this beautiful essay at the outset of the pandemic about how we'll all be back together again. Just look up Dave Grohl pandemic. And he wrote this beautiful, like in Rolling Stone, like this beautiful essay about like, we're all getting back together again, but we've got to do this thing. And it's going to be the inaugural concert outdoor event in Cincinnati, July 28th.
Oh, wow.
I have not bought tickets because I just heard about it. I think I'm gonna get tickets. And then St. Vincent is coming to Cincinnati in September. I'm going to that. I've seen her one other time in Cincinnati. She is phenomenally good. But listening to Wise, so last Monday, not yesterday, but the previous Monday was Bob Dylan's 80th birthday, as you know.
Mm-hmm.
I have not been able to listen to anything but Bob Dylan for the last 8 days. I tried.
That checks out.
Yeah. I'm just so happy. I'm just so happy when I listen to him.
Good.
So anyways.
I did listen to, I think all of last Tuesday, I listened to Ring Them Bells, like every version by every cover artist, every live edition. Like,
Isn't it beautiful?
It's very, very good. I love it.
Okay. Did you listen to Not Dark yet?
I don't think I got there.
Okay, I'll get you there.
Okay.
Friends,
it's great to be with you all.
This is the season finale of Are You There, God? We'll be back in, I believe, late July, early August, and we'll get back at it with our next season.
Woo!
And look for. We're gonna make it better.
We'll talk more about hot topics like abortion and polyamory, and also things like confession and rogation days.
This is who we are.
This is our brand.
This is our. We are defining our brand right now. Okay, there's no better way to end. We'll miss you. I'll miss you.
Have a great summer.
I'll talk to you outside of here. And friends, we will be putting some reruns up for you to watch if you care to. And we're going to be, but we will miss you.
Yes.
Betsy, Leslie, Mary, Kathy, Lisa, Gary, all the folks who've joined us. And if you're watching us from at home from afar, if you're catching up, we'll be back. We love doing this. We love you guys, and we'll see you. We'll see you in a few months. We'll see you in a couple months.